So thank you for the introduction, and I'd also like to thank Joseph Sierra from Fido for inviting me today for the opportunity to speak to everyone. I hope all of you are doing well, and we all hope that we can start to get back to some normalcy in our lives and get back on our golf courses where we truly feel comfortable. In a few minutes, I hope Greg Fryermuth from Pure Seed will be joining us. He had an earlier commitment, but if he does join us, I'm going to be asking Greg a few questions as well. Greg has many years of experience with Paspalum, specifically seeded Paspalum and interceding. So today we're going to talk about Paspalum. It's a broad overview. Specifically, we're going to be talking about Pure Dynasty. Some of the topics that we're going to cover today are seeding Paspalum, interceding Paspalum, and we're going to touch on putting green management as well. So Seashore Paspalum is a warm season perennial grass that spreads by rhizomes and stolons. Seashore Paspalum is native to tropical and subtropical regions of North and South America, Africa, Southeast Asia, Southern Europe, and parts of the Middle East. Pure Dynasty is a seeded Paspalum that was released by Pure Seed Testing and is marketed by Atlas Turf International. The improved genetics of Pure Dynasty make it equal to the best vegetative variety sold in the market today. As I mentioned, it was developed at Pure Seed Testing in Canby, Oregon. Platinum TE, which many of you are familiar with, is one of the parents, the genetic parents in the seed variety. Prior to releasing Pure Dynasty, we spent 3 years of global testing to make sure that it performed well and would meet the needs of the industry. The breeding was done for specific qualities: salt tolerance, disease tolerance, and probably most important, turf quality. So breeding continues in Oregon with Crystal Fricker and her team at Pure Seed Testing. You're probably familiar with Pure Seed, with many of their cool season varieties, ryegrass, bentgrass varieties, fescues. And the breeding continues with Paspalum. Crystal's now working on dwarf type seeded Paspalums. She's collaborating with Dr. Paul Raymer with some herbicide resistant Paspalums, and drought tolerance is also part of her program. Some of you may have had the opportunity to visit the facilities at Pure Seed Testing at one of the field days, where you can go and look at some of the new varieties that are coming on the market. So, as I just mentioned, not only does the breeding take place in Oregon, but also that is where the seed is grown, or the turf is grown for seed production. And it is grown right in the same region as the bentgrass varieties and fescues and ryegrass varieties. And that may seem strange that it is, the production sites are there, but that is where the best success has been for production. In the initial stages, production was tried in some of the southern parts of the United States, and the seed yields were just not enough to make it a viable product in the marketplace. So if you ever get a chance to visit us out in Oregon, not only can you see the testing facilities, but you can also see some of the production fields there as well. So here are a few pictures of Pure Dynasty production. The picture on the upper left-hand side is the Paspalum growing up and producing seed heads. That's about a foot to a foot and a half, 18 inches tall. You guys can figure out the metric side of that. On the upper right-hand picture is a machine called a stripper header. It goes along, floats on top of the turf and collects the seed. And then the center picture, you can see the seed falling into that front bend with a lot of debris that goes in there as well. And what happens after that, the seed is dried and then it is cleaned before it goes into the production side where it's coated. So when we package Pure Dynasty, we sell it in buckets. Those are 11.3 kg buckets. The seed is coated blue, and you can see a cool picture here with a plant starting to emerge out of one of the seedlings, and you can still see the blue coating on the seed. The coating that we use on Pure Dynasty is proprietary. It has a water absorbing agent. It has some product on there to mitigate salt and a fertilizer component to help with the germination. So when you receive an order of Pure Dynasty, there's a lot of technology that went into the product before it arrives to the end user. So before we get into some of the specifics of growing and planting, I just wanted to touch base on how to handle and store seeded paspalums. Unlike some of the other seeded products that you're used to, it needs to be stored in a cool, dry location. If it's stored in a hot, humid location, the germination will drop quickly. If you partially use a bucket, you need to put it back into a cool location and seal it back up tight. So what are the applications for Pure Dynasty? Football and soccer pitches, golf courses, equestrian facilities, landscaping, and erosion control. Before using any seeded turfgrass product or any turfgrass product in general, but specifically before using Pure Dynasty, there's some considerations you need to think about. Your water quality, your soil quality, drainage, sunlight, air movement, foot traffic, and your maintenance budget. Despite many rumors out there, there are salinity tolerances for paspalums. You can grow in paspalums at higher salt levels than 5,000 parts per million, but the germination does go down. And when you get above 15,000 parts per million, certainly there's some things that need to be done with your soils and with your maintenance practices. Paspalum cannot be grown in with, or grown period, with direct ocean water. Some other considerations before using, make sure you have your soil and water test complete. You need to prepare several weeks ahead before planting to know what you're dealing with your soil and water. And then you need to make the necessary adjustments prior to planting. Make sure you inspect your irrigation system to make sure it's operating properly. You don't want to apply seed and then find out you've got problems with your irrigation system. And do not apply a pre-emerge herbicide 4 months prior to planting. You will have some residual effects that will affect germination. So in a few minutes, I'm going to ask Greg Fryermuth to talk about some different practices and different locations that he's been involved with interseeding. But first, I want to talk about just general installation of Paspalum seed, specifically on new locations. There are multiple ways to install Paspalum. You could use a tractor-mounted seeder like this Bleck that you see in the upper left-hand corner. You can use a drop seeder. You can hydromulch, and you can even use a rotary seeder. My preference would be to see you use something else besides a rotary seeder, but it will certainly work. Here's a picture from the Middle East where a drop spreader was used, and you can see the plants just starting to emerge up in perfectly straight lines. So for new construction, you need to prepare the ground and get your seed bed exactly how you want it. You can apply a pre-plant fertilizer. Something to keep in mind is Paspalums do not use nitrogen during their first, or uptake nitrogen, excuse me, in their first 4 to 6 weeks of growth. So if you're used to growing Bermuda or some of the other varieties that are heavy nutrient users in the beginning, it's almost the exact opposite thought process. So this gives you the opportunity to really work on your soils, especially if you have high salt content or other heavy metals, and the plant's really not going to rely on nitrogen. Again, check your irrigation system before planting. The planting rate is between 72 kgs and 215 kgs per hectare. We recommend that you lightly roll the seed in, but you do not bury the seed, and then turn on the irrigation immediately after seeding. So next, we're going to talk about interseeding. And Greg, are you with us?
Hi, John. Yes, Greg is with us. Do you want him to get in?
Yeah, I was going to ask him a few questions and get him to comment as well.
Okay. So, Greg, if you are listening to us, if you please turn on your webcam and your microphone. Okay. Hello.
Hey, Greg, are you there?
Yes, but we cannot hear you, Greg. We have some trouble with your microphone, Greg. Greg, if you are listening to me, you have to choose properly your microphone, your audio channel. If you please can go to the audio options, you can choose your microphone.
Okay, we'll let.
Okay, if not, John,
Yep, I'll go ahead and if Greg.
Yeah, and Greg, if you can, you just keep trying on, please.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Awesome. So interseeding Pure Dynasty is becoming very popular with older golf courses who want to change their turf species. So in theory, interseeding is a practice of seeding the same species or new species into a stand of turf for the purpose of increasing density and a lot of times changing the turf to overcome environmental issues like higher salt contents that have happened over time. Projects replacing older Paspalum varieties will find that Pure Dynasty has improved disease tolerance, a finer leaf blade, a tighter canopy, and better density. Projects replacing Bermuda grass, zoysia, and rye varieties will find that the Pure Dynasty has a superior salt tolerance, improved shade and low light tolerance, and in some cases, better wear resistance. So I'm going to get into some of the techniques of interseeding, and there's no perfect way. Every course is different. And when you start thinking about this process, I would urge you to reach out to other golf clubs and other superintendents or groundskeepers that have gone through this process. So in theory, you want to thin out the existing turf canopy. You can do this by scalping, verticutting, heavy brushing, or using a product like a Chloro top field maker. And prior to planting, you want to put out soil amendments. And again, going back to your soil and water test, put out the amendments that you need. You really need to hold off on any fertilization. Again, counterintuitive, but if you're seeding Paspalum into a Bermuda grass, putting out a pre-plant fertilizer would also encourage the Bermuda to grow back faster, and that's not what you want to do. And you can also apply a growth regulator such as Primo prior to the seed application to slow down the growth of the turf grass that you're seeding into. Again, the seeding rates are the same as if you were planting a new project, 72 kgs to 250 kgs per hectare. One of the most important things in interseeding is that you have good seed to soil contact, and it's very important that you do not bury the seed too deep. Some seeded varieties, some species do not mind being buried. Paspalum does not germinate well when it's buried too deep. After planting, keeping the soil wet for a couple of weeks is imperative. If you're on a golf course that has to remain open or will be letting play start back soon, communication is going to be very important with the golfers, that they have to understand that the soil needs to remain wet. Keeping cart traffic and equipment traffic to a minimum on the seeded areas is important. And again, even after you see some germination, continuing to hold off on the fertilization for a while. So here are some pictures of some different techniques in the upper left-hand corner. There's a verticutter. This method is used to create grooves in the ground where you could seed into. It's difficult to see, but on the bottom left is some ground that's open. And if you look really close, you can see some of the blue paspalum seed in that ground. And in the bottom right is a picture, and you can see, and this is a picture of Pure Dynasty has been seeded into Bermuda grass, and you can see the slow transition, the lighter color being the new paspalum seed that's coming up, the darker color being the Bermuda grass that it was seeded into. So I'm going to show you some pictures of some different locations. This is Sangual in Mallorca. Graham McNiven in Mallorca helped consult with Sangual on this project, and I've relied on Graham a good bit. He has a wealth of knowledge with interseeding, and this project went really well. They had a mix of ryegrass with some Bermuda grass mixed in, but mainly ryegrass. And you can see in this picture the Pure Dynasty on the left-hand side of the photo, a strip of the that was not interseeded, and then you can see their bent grass approaches going up to their putting greens. And this was a very successful transition. The paspalum just took off. The team there hit their timing exactly right with the weather, and have been very successful. Here's another picture where you can see they stopped the cedar, and you can see the exact lines of the transition.
John, just one thing. Greg has his micro on, so Greg, if you can hear us, please just say hello.
Greg, you there?
Okay. Okay. He's not there. Okay. I just try to, well, go ahead, please. Thank you.
That's okay. Yeah, Greg, I introduced him earlier, and he has worked extensively with golf courses here in the United States and in the Caribbean and Central and South America on seeding Pure Dynasty. But he also had a lot of experience with sea spray in the past. And in Texas and Louisiana here in the United States, Greg's worked with multiple clubs on interseeding and changing out they're converting their turf varieties. So hopefully he can get online. Anyway, so here's a picture from a golf club in the United Arab Emirates. And 2 years ago, they started doing trials, knowing that their water was going to get converted from fresh water to treated water. And they knew that the water situation was going to be detrimental to their Bermuda grass. So they started working on different techniques to look at the timing of how fast they could transition areas. And on the left this is one picture with just a line dividing where they stopped seeding. So on the left was their Tifway 419. On the right was their interseeding trial, where they did a similar activity of thinning out the Bermuda grass, seeding the Pure Dynasty, and it's been very successful for them in their transition. This is an interesting picture. The superintendent took a drop spreader and did just a half turn on a putting green, interseeding into an existing paspalum. So this is CL 2000, a CL 2000 putting green with just a swath of Pure Dynasty, where he thinned out the area, put the drop seeder down, just did a quarter of a turn or a half turn with it, just to drop seed onto the edge of the putting green, and it really made a visual difference once it was grown in. So when interseeding Pure Dynasty, again, it's important to communicate with the membership about the process. I think that communication really needs to start several months ahead so that they know what's coming, because the playing conditions will not be optimal for the time that the golf course is really wet. Interseeding is not an instant process. It takes time. There will be areas that don't grow in as fast as other areas on the golf course or sports field or whatever you're seeding, and you may have to go back and touch some of those areas up. And interseeding is not going to solve all the problems on your golf course or sports field. If you have poor water conditions, you're in a location where you have just really harsh weather, the interseeding is not going to solve all your problems. So you have to find the combination that's going to work best for where you are. Factors affecting seed germination, water quality, we talked about that earlier. Your soil quality, soil temperature is really important. The warmer the soil, the better your chances are having faster germination. Same with air temperatures. If you're trying to interseed or just seed in general during the cooler months of the year, your success rate is going to be very low. And your irrigation capabilities, if you have a irrigation system where you don't get great coverage, that will certainly affect germination. And your seeding rate, if you try to go at a lower seeding rate, then your germination is going to be lower as well.
John, are you there?
Yes. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Everybody, this is Greg.
I have a lawn care company here today, and they've cut my cable, so I'm working off of my phone.
Okay.
I apologize. I had to reroute everything through my phone, so I apologize.
That's okay. So Greg, while we have you, and before we go further, we just talked about interseeding. Can you share with the audience some of the successes out in West Texas where they have and describe maybe some of the soil conditions that they were dealing with, and talk a little bit about Louisiana and some of the successes there with interseeding?
Sure. Well, I first got involved with the first seeded variety of Paspalum that we had, called Sea Spray. Some of you may have had experience with it, heard of it, maybe even have seeded with it and used it in the past. It was probably not the quality. I don't think that anywhere near what the quality is of Pure Dynasty. But the first project we got involved in, or I got involved in, was out in Corpus Christi, Texas, in which we had a golf course, a city golf course that had emerald Bermuda grass that was in decline, very poor shape. Water quality was very poor. And we came up with the idea, let's go out there and see if we can't interseed Sea Spray into those greens. We did go at about a 4-pound rate, which would be pretty close to 215 kg, if my math is correct here in my head. So we were very successful in getting that greens converted, but it did take, and I will stress this, it's a patience game. It's a waiting game of that transitioning from Bermuda to Paspalum. It took us about a year, maybe a little over a year, to get it to where the greens were in. They were great. Matter of fact, the USGA director of agronomy, Jim Moore, played in a tournament there 16 months after we had converted them. He said it was some of the best greens he'd ever seen. He had never really seen Paspalum before, played on Paspalum, and he was very, very, very impressed. I mean, he couldn't say enough about it. So I thought that was a pretty good success story and a win for us, which was our first win. And then we went on about it and did a lot more golf courses with it, interceding in the Caribbean. We did several golf courses, fairway golf course, interceding there at Guava Berry. I think John may have showed you a picture earlier of that. That golf course is completely 100% Paspalum now, thanks to Sea Spray, which that took a couple of years to do the conversion there. We also were involved, or I was also involved in the 2012 PGA Championship at Kiowa Island. Jeff Stone and Dr. Duncan had reached out to me, and we came up with a program of interceding Sea Spray into those fairways, starting in the tournament was in 2012, so we started in 2010, and we did 2 pounds per thousand, which would be what, 120 something kgs, and we did that. Is that correct? I think it was 125, somewhere around in there, kgs. We did that in June when they aerated, and we did that for the first 2 years, 2010, 2011, along the ocean holes. There was about 6 holes along the ocean that had predominantly, no pun intended, but Sea Spray drift onto the golf course, and it burned off all the Bermuda grass and made it unplayable and aesthetically not pleasing. So we interceded Sea Spray into those areas, and by 2012, the PGA Championship, those fairways along the ocean there were almost 100% Paspalum, and they were on television, and everybody raved about how well they striped up, how impressive they were with how well that turned out. And so we've been working with the interceding of Pure Dynasty and a lot of other projects in Louisiana, Texas, all over the country, and been sharing great success with it. I'd be glad to share any particulars with anybody, the process that we did. It can be daunting, I guess, when you first start out, but it's a very good process. It's a neat process. It's a lot of fun to work with, a lot of fun to be involved with. So, John, if you have any more questions, please fire away.
Thank you, Greg. I may have a few here shortly.
I can see your presentation on my phone, so we're good.
Okay.
It's very small.
Well, John, just before
Sure.
moving forward, there is a question related with irrigation water quality. Sure. This is a question Javier Schaap from Peru. He's asking. He says that you said for planting 5,000 ppm salt is fine, but what if we have 11,000 ppm all the time on the irrigation water? What would be your plan to seed with Pure Dynasty? Sorry. So
I'm going to answer this, and I'm going to let Greg chime in as well. He's familiar with that situation. If you have a consistent salt load, whether it's in your soils or in your irrigation water, drainage is going to be key. You're going to want to move those salts through your soils, and then you're going to want to amend those soils as good as you can prior to planting. Greg, what else would you add for Javier?
Well, and I'm familiar with this as well. Those ppms are pretty high. 11,000 is a very high, load on that soil, and it's not that, and I think John's alluded to this already. It's not that the grass itself won't handle it, because it will. It's just the problem that you get in with soil management is going to be the big issue, and you've got to be able to move that sodium out of that soil profile. You can add gypsum and things like that, a lot of gypsum, but it takes a lot of water movement through that soil profile to get that gypsum to interact with the sodium particles and knock it off the soil. And the problem is that you're dumping more sodium on top of that issue already. So I don't know that there's really a cut and dried answer to that, other than I would be very hesitant about recommending seed in that situation, or any kind of even vegetative material in that kind of situation. That's just, I hate to say that, but I'm kind of just, being honest with you.
And just to add to that, even with zoysia grasses that have some salt tolerance, and Bermuda grass would be a very big challenge there. It's the soils you got to deal with. So whether you're pushing the salts up or down, it's trying to mitigate those salts in the soil. So like Greg said, there's no cut and dry answer for that situation. All you can do is try to mitigate your situation as much as possible.
Can you blend the water? Is there a way to blend the water? Is there a way to ask if the attendee can blend water, maybe possibly, and get the TDS levels down by using, say, a freshwater source, blending it with the other soil, the other salt issued water?
Maybe this is a question where he can reach out to you after
Sure.
the seminar directly for some specifics on his project, so we can be on time, because we're
Yeah, okay.
Here.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. So moving on, Joseph asked me to touch on Paspalum putting green management, and managing Paspalum greens certainly have their nuances, just like managing ultra dwarf greens or bent grass greens. There's certain tricks to the trade, if you will, but Paspalum putting greens can provide the same quality putting surface as any other turf species when they're managed properly. We recommend using mowers that don't scalp. So if you've got a heavy mower and you have contours in the greens, scalping is detrimental to Paspalum. We recommend smooth rollers. The slide here says use of Wiley rollers on greens. We don't recommend Wiley rollers. We recommend solid rollers. You're going to have to monitor your greens daily. Sometimes it's okay to double cut greens. Your height of cut is important. The most successful superintendents I've seen with good green speeds, their heights of cut are not terribly low. Top dressing is important. The type of fertilizer you use, granulars are okay to use with Paspalum from time to time, but you're going to be more on a liquid program. We recommend a wet chemistry tissue test on a regular basis to look at your nutrients. Primo applications or growth regulators are important to the success of good Paspalum putting. And then the renovation process, or the aerification and verticutting frequencies are important. Rolling really helps Paspalum greens. It even helps with some of the disease pressure. If you have a moisture meter and a salinity meter, we recommend that you use those on a regular basis, and that you document every time you use them, to know where you are, and know where you have been as far as moisture and salinity. And you've got to be very slow and deliberate with your implementation of getting your green speeds to where you want them. You can't be too aggressive with your Paspalum greens as far as taking the mowing heights down quickly. Greg, any comments on putting green management from your end?
No, you pretty much have touched on everything, and it reiterates right back to what you said in the last comment about be very diligent in and you're lowering the height of the cut as you go along. It's just, you just don't want to scalp those the putting green, any surface out, because it's very slow to recover if you do scalp it.
Yeah. So I'm going to finish out just with some visual pictures of different projects and different things that I've come across over the past few years with the Pure Dynasty. This first picture is a really interesting test that was performed in Doha, leading up to the decision making, the decision of what type of turf to use for the World Cup stadiums and practice facilities there. And because the stadiums have a lot of shade and the environmental is very harsh there, this is a replicated shade trial, and you can see it goes from open to medium light to heavy shade, and the Paspalums outperformed all of the other varieties that were in these trials under these conditions. This is another stadium. This is King Abdullah Stadium in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. It's 100% Pure Dynasty. They had multiple species in the stadium and didn't have the success that they wanted. And the Pure Dynasty has done really well. It receives a tremendous amount of shade on a daily basis. It's one of the most difficult growing environments I've ever seen for any turf grass. You can see the shade, and this is the most sun that it receives at any given time during the day, all year. So you can, it's a very tough environment. This is one of the first projects that was ever seeded with Pure Dynasty as a short course in the Maldives. This was designed by Elazabal Golf Design. It's called Vela. Here's a Pure Dynasty project wall to wall in Bali. And this is a Cynthia Dye golf course here. Just added the picture because of the beauty. Another wall-to-wall Pure Dynasty golf course in Mauritius. And this is a renovation project in the Dominican Republic. Greg, you were involved in this project. It was challenging for them. Do you want to talk about their hydro-seed, the golf course?
Yeah, the golf course is this is a very challenging site. It's right on the Atlantic Ocean. Wind, just a tremendous amount of wind every day. So they ended up having to hydro-seed this. In addition, they also fought off 2 hurricanes during hurricane season, but they were still able to pull it off. And the picture, I think, explains everything, how it turned out. It's been featured in Forbes magazine, Golf Week magazine. They refer to it as the Pebble Beach of the Caribbean. So it really did. It turned out fantastic. Greens, tees, fairways, rough, everything is 100% Pure Dynasty. And the first, well, I can't say, I'm not allowed to say who the first professional golfer is that bought a home there, but he was so impressed with the conditions that they purchased a home. He is a tour player. That's all I'm going to say.
Thanks.
Sworn secrecy.
Yeah. And this is a project called Dubai Hills in Dubai, and this is not Photoshopped. This is the real view from the golf course. It's stunning with Dubai and the Burj Khalifa in the background. And this project has Pure Dynasty in the roughs, tees, and fairways, and has platinum Paspalum on the putting surfaces. Here's a project in Oman, and the putting greens are Pure Dynasty. And this is a project just north of Jeddah in Saudi Arabia where they have, it's called Royal Greens, European Golf Design. And they have a European tour stop there now, and a ladies tour stop, European tour stop as well. So as a summary here, Pure Dynasty was developed by Pure Seed Testing with Crystal Fricker and her team. They continue to work on new varieties of Paspalum. It's marketed by Atlas Turf and distributed by Semillas Fido. It has quick germination, tournament quality turf grass, and excellent disease resistance, and has a good, nice dark green color. Some things to remember: you cannot irrigate with ocean water. As turf managers, you need to test your soil and water on a regular basis. Managing your nutrients is a key factor to the health of the plant, especially with dealing with high salts. That really helps prevent disease. Putting green speeds can be equal to those of dwarf Bermuda grass. And to finish up, it's important that you get the real thing. Always buying a certified turf grass is important. When you're buying a certified product, you know it's backed by research and the quality is unmatched and that it's legitimate. So it's important that you get the real thing. Again, I'd like to thank Joseph and Fido for inviting me to speak today. For your needs, you can reach out to Joseph. He's going to speak in just a few minutes about some other projects in Spain, and he's your contact. And you can find out more about our company on the web, Facebook, Twitter, and we're regularly updating our post. So thank you again for your time today.
Thank you very much, John. Thank you for your time, for your collaboration with Campus Testbed. There are several questions, maybe both for you and Greg. Mm-hmm. A couple from Mario Tirado. He's asking, what's the best sand for seeding or interseeding? And do you have any special advice or trick for interseeding on bent grass?
Yeah, the best sand?
The best sand for seeding or interseeding.
Yeah. So as far as the sand quality for top dressing, is that the question? I'm sorry.
Yes, I think.
Okay. Yeah, you're going to want to have a sand that does not have a lot of fines in it, and you need to be particular about the angles of the sand. My suggestion always, if you find a sand that you think looks good, you should send it off to a laboratory to get tested to make sure that it falls into, maybe the USGA specifications, but at least specifications that it will not do harm as it migrates down through your soil profile. It's probably not the best answer that you wanted, but there's so many different sand sources around the world. You really need to make sure that what you're putting out is not going to cause you long-term problems. And as far as interseeding into bent grass, Greg, do you want to talk about that?
It would just be the same procedure that we would do for Bermuda grass or for any surface for that matter. The best thing, I guess, I assume it's the putting green we're talking about. Is that correct? I assume.
I guess so.
Joseph, yeah. You know, there's a process we could go through, and they were more than welcome to email me if they want to, and I can kind of just give them a whole list of, you know, the process, how it goes about, because it's can be lengthy, but I'd be glad to, you know, to go through it in an email, because it's, you know, you use Supremo, the verticutting and everything else that goes with it. So, you know, I'd be glad to email them and we could discuss it that way. That would be
Okay,
best.
great.
I don't know how much time we have.
Okay, great. Another question from Gianni Cassini. He's an Italian grantsman, but right now he's working in France. On pure sandy soil, how long does the germination take? And to get the 100 full coverage?
Yeah, so again, soil temperature and air temperature are really the key drivers for the initial germination. So if you're seeding in June, for example, you should see germination within 10 days. Once germination takes place, the grow-in is quick. You could see almost full coverage within 45 days if the conditions are good. Again, if your water's poor or you have other challenges, that can slow down the grow-in process.
Okay.
Yes.
Another question, Sergio Carvalho. This is a bit long. Lately, from a design perspective, it's thought that golf courses are becoming too small due to the increasing power of the world top players. For this reason, it might be necessary to modify some courses to increase the difficulty, either through increasing tee green distances or through more aggressive rough that punishes the long shot from the tee. In your opinion, what characteristics should the grass of this rough have? Would it be possible to adapt the current ones through some treatment, or would a replacement be necessary? Should designers of new fields already take this factor into account during the design process? Thank you very much.
Yeah, so this is a global challenge for architects and golf tournaments and members at private clubs and public facilities. The technology is out driving, if you will, the golf ball and the golf course. So architects are having to get more and more creative with the land that they have to work with, whether it's contours where maybe a landing area creates a bounce that rolls off into the rough, or hidden features that you can't see sometimes. Pete Dye was famous for that in his design. But certainly turf grass plays a big role in the design features of the golf course. And there's no one size fits all for turf grass. And some, for warm season turf grasses, a Bermuda or a zoysia may be more applicable than a Paspalum, and vice versa. So when we work with architects on a regular basis with their turf selections, and we always recommend that they look at some other golf courses with turf varieties to see if they can get the playability that they want with a specific turf grass variety. So if you wanted, because Paspalum could be mowed down to green height, putting green height, you could get your fairways rolling very fast, which could create a situation where the ball would roll off into the rough, even though you may get a shot right down the middle, and that becomes penal. So there are certain strategies that choosing the right turf grass can help equalize the situation where technology is creating longer drives and out driving normal landing areas. I hope that answered the question.
I hope so as well. Okay, thank you. There are a couple of questions about herbicides. One from Mario Tirado. He says, which herbicide can we use against POA and Kikuyu and Pure Dynasty? And the other one from Marcelo Munoz. Not sure, what would you recommend to control broadleaf weeds on this paspalum?
Greg, do you want to talk about that, or you want me to?
Yeah, well, the first one, as far what POA is that we're talking about, is taking POA out of paspalum.
Yes, POA and Kikuyu.
There's a new chemistry out there that's actually labeled for use on paspalum, and that's Pilex. And that was one of the ones. It does cause a bleaching of the POA plant, which may or may not be objectionable to the golfers or from the club standpoint. But that's just something to think about. As far as broadleaf weeds, any of your 3-way 2,4-D type products will work. There's a number of products out there that work on post-emergent weed control. There's a publication put out by the University of Georgia that really addresses all of that. I could send a link to somebody, but it's Dr. Patrick McCullough did a very extensive study on Seashore Paspalum and weed control. And I'd highly recommend that they go to that site. It's put out, like I said, by the University of Georgia. Patrick McCullough is the professor that wrote the article, and it's very, very extensive. It addresses everything.
Yeah, and just a couple of comments from my side. So for POA control, paspalum, you can use almost any pre-emerge on paspalum at label rates. So if you can get on a good program, if you have pre-emerge herbicides available, and you can really take on the POA. Kikuyu is like the devil. When you think you've gotten rid of it, it comes back somewhere else, and that's always going to be a challenge. There's no perfect herbicide for Kikuyu in paspalum. You can slow it down, but it seems to pop up in other places, and that's kind of the same with Bermuda grass and zoysia as well. It's just awful. Yeah.
And goosegrass is another one that's difficult to control in paspalum too. Just a side note on that.
Yep.
Great. Another question, Xavier Millet. Which would be your recommendation when paspalum has to compete with Bermuda?
The strongest will survive. There's no herbicides that will completely eradicate Bermuda out of paspalum right now. That's one of the technologies Paul Raymer's been working on at the University of Georgia, as well as Dr. Duncan and Crystal Fricker out in Oregon. And I think in a few years, we're going to be in a much better position for Bermuda grass eradication. But when you have Bermuda grass and paspalum in the same growing environment, one's eventually going to take over the other, and usually it's your climate, your water, and soil that are going to dictate that.
Right.
Okay, perfect. This another question. Maybe this is not for you, but do you know any herbicide to control Seashore Paspalum on bent grass greens?
I don't know anything offhand. I'm sure there's ones that are out there. I don't know offhand which one would be, the best. John may know. I don't.
I'm struggling with that too. I think Patrick McCullough would be a good resource for.
Okay. Another question. On very low light environments, down the tree canopies, what would you recommend rather than artificial equipment or cutting down the trees?
Yeah, so thinning out the trees would be the first thing that I would try to do, is to create as much light by thinning out the canopy of the tree. That's a problem, a global problem, where you have trees that no matter what you're trying to grow, it's just not going to grow because of the density of the shade. Dr. John Shirakin at the University of Tennessee is a great resource for shade when it comes to trees on golf courses. And I believe there is a webinar that he has done for soccer pitches as well for golf courses, dealing with shade. You know, stadiums have the luxury of using grow lights. Golf courses, there are a few golf courses who are using grow lights, but it's really not a practical application like it is for soccer pitches, just because of the cost and the process of moving them on and off. So not wanting to cut down your tree or not being able to cut down your trees, thinning them up is important. And along with that is air movement too. Typically, if you've got that much shade, you've also got air movement problems, and certainly considering having fans around those areas if it's possible to create some air movement as well.
Okay, and the last one, and then we are gonna let Joseph speak. This is the last. This is from Marco Martin. He's asking for advice or recommendation. We have a golf course with Seashore Paspalum on greens, and we would like to change into pure dynasty to increase the speed on greens. We actually don't get more than 6. Do we have to close our greens to change Seashore into pure dynasty, and also kill the Seashore previously?
Well, I think you have a couple of options depending on if the golf course can close, or if it's a situation where you want to keep the golf course open during the transition. Obviously, if you can close it, spraying out the existing paspalum, you could do that, kill it off, and then plant into the canopy that way to reduce competition. If you cannot close the golf course for any length of time, you're really going to need to take 2 weeks and do the mechanical preparation, seed it and water it, and let the Pure Dynasty take over. The Pure Dynasty will take over the CL1, especially as you lower the heights of cut. So that's where you really have to have some patience, and it may take you up to a couple of years to have a complete transition to the Pure Dynasty. Okay. Any other questions?
Sorry, John, I was talking with the micro muted. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Sorry. Thank you very much for your time and your collaboration. Your collaboration. That was the last question. And what we are gonna do, I just converted Joseph to presenter, so he's gonna speak for a while. And thank you again, John and Greg.
Thanks, Joseph.
And just okay, all yours, Joseph.
Good afternoon to everybody. Everybody hears me? I think it's fine.
Yes, fine.
So I will speak very shortly, just to show a little small experiences in Paspalum, a few courses around the Mediterranean and in the western side of Africa. So the first picture is how looks last week how looks in fact now Pure Dynasty in our plots in Cabrera de Mar, close to Barcelona. So it's Mediterranean weather, nice conditions, not so hot. So is how it looks today, mown about at 20 millimeters, 22 millimeters. So in Spain has been two nice projects of Seashore Paspalum. The first one is Alta Una Golf in Murcia. This project is being not finished yet. So last year start the seeding. So it's a project just, the architect is Marco Martin, so that he made a question before. So the building company is GTM Golf. They did a good job there, and it's wall-to-wall Pure Dynasty. So Murcia is in the east side of Spain. It's quite hot weather in summertime, and is the perfect site for Pure Dynasty. Superintendent is Jose Carlos Martinez. We have been working very closely with him, and I think they did a good job. They are very happy about the result. The seeding time starting June 25th, 2019. So the conditions were good, were perfect. The seeding rate was about 8 grams per square meter for tees and fairways, and about 10 grams per square meter for greens. So the new plants were popping up in 9-10 days. So and the playing conditions were the course was ready to play in 2.5 months. In fact, they opened in December, but for other reasons. So this is one good example of a new project in Spain, a Marco Martin project with Seashore Paspalum wall to wall. And yesterday I was speaking with the superintendent, and they are happy about everything. So about the establishment, about the quality, so about the situation. And Marco even is here, can say something else. So these are the pictures that they were sending to me yesterday, fairways, how they are looking. So the color is nice. And here we have also green. So it's a good example in the right place of Spain for Seashore Paspalum. So this is a really nice project that is continuing. This is one. The second one is Terramar in Sitges. This in this case the company is Bior. The architect is Martin Ebert. The economic consultant is David Bataller, and the superintendent now, because last year was Maria, now is Joaquin Ibañez. So in that case, they were doing 3 holes. Seeding time was July 2019. So the seeding rate was 10 grams per square meter for greens and 8 grams per square meter for tees and fairways. So was also wall to wall. So greens, tees, fairways, and the seed was popping up in 15 days. So in that case, early seeding was not so fast as seeding in end of July. So the end of July seeding was very fast. Before took a little bit more time. But anyway, so the golf course, I think David told me this morning that is ready to open. So, and if they are not open, is for other reasons, because the COVID and so on, but not because the quality is perfect. And here you can see the picture of the green of Pure Dynasty in Sitges. So here there are the 2 projects in Spain that just done with Pure Dynasty. And just I am going to finish showing some a few of new projects around. One is Costa de Eje renovation in Canary Islands in Tenerife. So this project will start now in June. So and they will renew 18 holes to Pure Dynasty. So in that case, fairways. So I think will be a nice project in the right place. Another golf course with Pure Dynasty that is started the seeding already is in Cabo Verde. So one small island in the Atlantic side. So 1 hour far away from Canary Islands. So it's semi-tropical weather. In the South Island, the architect is Fulvio Vanni, and so they start seeding, and So I think will be very successful. In that case, they have several issues with salty water, like in Murcia. So the weather, I think, is perfect. So, and they are happy so far. Another project that is going on is a Titanic golf course in Belek. This is Antalya in Turkey. So in that case, the architect is Gary Johnson of European Golf Design. So here there are a few examples of new things that are coming with Paspalum. So, and from my side, just thank you very much for your time. I think it was very good seminar. Thank you to John and to Greg for the nice information. And if there is any question, so I will be happy to answer in Spanish or in English, I don't know.
Thank you very much, Josep. Thank you very much, John and Greg. And right now there are no more questions. So if you have any other advice or any other recommendations that you'd like to say to attendees before closing this webinar.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Yeah, really. We appreciate it very much, Jed.
Gracias, thank you. Ha sido un placer de poder estar aquí.
Okay, the pleasure was mine. Thank you very much to you. Just remember that I would like to say that next Thursday, 21st, we will have another webinar. We are going to talk about autonomous mowers. We are going to have as the presenters over Richmond and Erwan Lecoq, our head greenkeeper that is working at Winston Golf in Germany. So I think it's going to be a very interesting webinar as well. Thank you very much, John, Greg, and Joseph.
Right.
See you. Bye. Adios.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Adios.
Thank you. Adios. Buenas tardes.
Bye-bye.